Ever feel that you're living in a cultural bubble? Today, on the deep dive, we're popping that bubble. We're diving into those parts of American life that might seem a little strange to people from other parts of the world.
It's so interesting how we decide what's normal, right? What seems totally mundane in one country can be really funny or even kind of shocking somewhere else.
Exactly. I think we're about to uncover some real head scratchers today. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely, let's get into it.
Oh, let's jump in with something classic. Portion sizes. I'm talking about those mountains of food that you just sometimes see in America.
You're talking about those supersized meals.
Yes. It's fascinating. It's like they almost defy the laws of physics.
Uh-huh, yeah. The American supersize phenomenon. It actually goes way back. After World War II, when the U.S. was booming, having a lot of something, especially food, became a status symbol. It meant you were successful.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that led to bigger meals, overflowing plates, you name it. This idea that more is always better when it comes to food.
And that more is better idea, it's not just about food, is it? It feels like it's kind of everywhere you look in American culture. But going back to those massive portions, do other cultures really see that differently?
Absolutely. Many other parts of the world, especially where resources are limited, people eat much smaller portions. It's much more about mindful eating, savoring each bite, and really appreciating the food. It's not just about like filling your stomach.
Right. It's so easy to forget how much our background affects how we see the world. Like even
Yeah.
something as simple as portion sizes.
Exactly. It all comes down to perspective. And speaking of perspective, let's talk about something that often confuses people who visit the U.S. free refills.
Oh, are you talking about the holy grail of American dining?
Go.
You mean where you can just keep that soda coming forever?
Exactly. In so many cultures, you pay for every single drink you order. The idea of free refills, especially for sugary drinks, is practically unheard of.
I know. I've heard stories of people coming to the US and being totally floored by it. Like they're amazed by how, well, how bold it seems.
It's one of those things that's so normal here that we don't even think about it. But then you go somewhere else and you realize how unusual it is. It really makes you think about the economics of restaurants, how much people drink, and even what a dining experience is supposed to be like.
So what do they do in other countries? Like do restaurants just add the cost of drinks into the menu prices or something?
Yeah, a lot of times.
Hmm.
Or they'll offer smaller drinks at a lower price. It's a completely different approach, reflecting their cultural norms and sometimes even their health concerns.
Wow, that's wild. It really makes you realize that even these everyday things are totally shaped by where we grow up.
You got it. It's all about expanding our understanding of what's possible and what's considered normal, and how different those things can be depending on where you are in the world.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about another iconic part of American culture, the love of cars.
Ah, yes, the automobile,
Oh,
a symbol of freedom, independence, and sometimes, a little bit of excess.
it's true. In America, we drive everywhere, even for really short distances sometimes. I'm guilty of it too. I guess we're all about convenience and speed above everything else.
Well, there's a lot of history there. The U.S. embraced car culture really early on. Then you had the interstate highway system and the rise of the suburbs, and that really cemented the car's place as the main way to get around, which of course affected how cities were planned and how infrastructure was built, and often not in favor of public transportation.
You're right. In a lot of American cities, it's just way easier to get in your car than it is to take public transport. And then there's this whole cultural association between cars and freedom and being an individual.
For sure, it's a big part of the American identity, for better or for worse. But, there's also the environmental impact of all those cars and the fact that other ways to get around haven't been given as much attention. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Okay, so we've talked about food, drinks, and getting around. What other uniquely American things are we going to explore today?
Well, why don't we talk about something that always gets me thinking? Air conditioning.
Ah, yes, the constant hum of the AC, a true symbol of American summer. Have you ever heard people say they have to bring a sweater when they visit the US in July?
It's not far off. Americans definitely like their indoor spaces cooler compared to many other places. It's kind of fascinating how that happened.
Yeah. Is it just because we have access to better air conditioning here? What's the deal with that?
I'd say it's a mix of things. The U.S. was one of the first countries to really embrace AC, and over the 20th century, it became more affordable and widespread. At the same time, buildings started being designed to be sealed off, climate controlled, instead of relying on windows or natural airflow.
So we basically engineered our way into needing air conditioning all the time.
Pretty much. And of course, now there are people who question the environmental impact, all the energy it takes to keep things so cool all the time.
Right. It's that balance again, isn't it? Comfort versus being environmentally conscious. It seems like that's always a factor.
Exactly. Being aware of the trade-offs and making smart choices as individuals and as a society.
Okay, let's lighten the mood a bit. Let's talk about something that's always good for a laugh, at least for people visiting America. Tipping culture.
Oh boy. Tipping in America. It's a topic that can be confusing, frustrating, and even a little awkward for people who weren't raised with it.
For sure. You see people from other countries trying to figure out how much to tip, who to tip, when to tip. It's like this secret code that everyone else knows.
And the reasons behind it aren't always so clear either. Basically, tipping started as a way to make up for the low wages of service workers, especially in restaurants. But then it just became so normal that now it's built into how restaurants set prices and pay their employees.
It's true, it's more than just a reward for good service. It's part of how people make a living.
Absolutely. Although the system isn't perfect, is it? Inconsistent income, weird social interactions, maybe even inequality are all part of it. It's complicated, but it's deeply rooted in American culture.
Definitely something to talk about, that's for sure. Speaking of things that'll get people talking, how about those prescription drug commercials you always see in America?
Ah, yes, the commercials with the catchy jingles, the happy actors, and then they hit you with this super fast list of side effects that sound worse than the actual illness.
It's so true. It's like they're saying, ask your doctor about this drug, but just so you know, you might spontaneously combust.
You're not wrong. America is one of the few places that lets companies advertise prescription drugs directly to the public, and it really confuses people from other countries.
I bet. So how come it's allowed here? What's the logic?
Well, there are a bunch of reasons. Some people say it helps consumers because it tells them what treatments are available. Others say it's a free speech issue. And then there's the influence of the pharmaceutical industry, which definitely benefits from these ads.
It's crazy how cultural norms, money, and even laws all play a role in something as simple as a TV commercial. Who knows what else we'll find if we keep digging.
Right. The more we look at these little cultural things, the more we realize how much we just assume is normal. What seems totally ordinary to us might be really strange to someone else. And that's where the learning happens, you know? That clash of perspectives can help us grow.
100%. I think it's time for a short break to process all this. Don't go anywhere, though. We've got a lot more to uncover as we continue our deep dive into these interesting American quirks. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We're looking at those parts of American life that might make some people scratch their heads and say, really?
We've covered a lot of ground already, haven't we? Portion sizes, air conditioning, those tipping customs, and even those interesting drug commercials.
It's amazing how easy it is to forget that these things aren't universal, you know? But when you step outside the U.S., you realize just how unique they are. And speaking of unique, I think we've got a few more cultural quirks to unpack, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. One that always comes to mind is the American obsession with high school sports. Those Friday night football games, the cheerleaders, the whole shebang.
It's true. I went to a high school football game in Texas once, and it was like the biggest event of the year. Everyone was there, and the energy was incredible. It was more than just a game. It was like this whole community thing.
Exactly. High school sports here are really wrapped up in local pride and a sense of community. And then there's this idea that being a star athlete can be your ticket to a better future, especially with college scholarships and all that.
Right. Although it's interesting because in a lot of other countries, academics are the main focus. Extracurriculars are fine, of course, but they don't get nearly as much attention or importance.
That's a really important point. For example, in many European and Asian countries, there's so much pressure to do well in school that anything else is seen as secondary. In the U.S., it's like there are many different paths to success, and being a great athlete is one of them.
It's like different cultures define success differently, you know? It really makes you think. Okay, before we wrap things up, I have to ask you about one more American quirk, one that always makes me laugh. Bathroom stalls.
You need those infamous gaps. They're quite a conversation starter for people visiting from other countries.
Seriously. Why are they like that? Is it some kind of strange social experiment to see how much awkward eye contact we can handle?
Probably not, although it's a funny thought. My guess is it has more to do with practicality, things like building codes, cost, maybe even cleaning routines. But it definitely highlights how different our idea of bathroom privacy is compared to other places, like Europe, where those fully enclosed stalls are the standard.
It's crazy how something so ordinary can be so telling about a culture, isn't it? Even the design of a bathroom stall says something about who we are.
100%. It reminds us that our way isn't the only way. A lot of times, there's no right or wrong, just different ways of doing things, shaped by history, by our values, and even by those little quirks that make us human.
I love that. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the curious world of American culture, what's the one big takeaway you'd want our listeners to remember?
More than anything, I hope it sparks curiosity. The world is full of fascinating cultural differences, and if we can approach them with an open mind and maybe a sense of humor, we can learn so much, not just about other cultures, but about ourselves too.
That's such a great point. It's about being open to new things, questioning our assumptions, and remembering that what seems strange to us might be perfectly normal to someone else. And hey, maybe while we're exploring those differences, we'll even learn a thing or two about ourselves.
Precisely. So the next time something makes you go, huh, that's weird, don't shy away from it. Ask questions, dig a little deeper, and embrace all those differences that make the world such a rich and interesting place.
Well said. This has been The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep asking those questions.